Jeff Fuller with you. You are listening to Jay Fuller Interviews. Jay Fuller Interviews on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Facebook group. And it's going to become the Backfire podcast on Spotify as a backfire set intentionally by forest firefighters to consume all the negativity that could fuel that forest fire. And so I think it's time that we have a backfire to eliminate and alleviate some of that negativity. But right now we have Sekou Smith joining. Sekou, welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great. Hey, so you're from Grand Rapids, Michigan. My wife is from Sparta, Michigan, and my son is actually going to Grand Rapids Community College in about 3 weeks. Can
Oh
you
wow.
talk about what it was like being a part of the Grand Rapids community?
Oh man, it was fantastic. It's a great place to grow up. An interesting, diverse area when you talk about the makeup of the people. Quintessential Midwestern America, in terms of culture. And when I was your son's age, 18, graduating high school and all that good stuff, it was. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie American Pie.
Yeah.
But a kid who went to a high school maybe 5 miles from my house wrote that movie, and it was
Hmm.
based on the neighborhood that we lived in, including the hot dog place they were hanging out at. It's a place called Yesterdog that everybody in the Grand Rapids area knows very well. So it was great. My parents made a great choice in terms of where to raise us, and all my cousins and grandparents, cousins on both sides. We had a huge extended family that all grew up within 10 miles of each other. It's just a fantastic place to raise a family and to live and work. And I haven't lived home since I went away to college, but I miss it all the time. And we try and get back at least once a year to enjoy it and visit family and friends.
Sekou, where did you go to high school?
Grand Rapids Central High School is where I went. I went to St. Stephen's. It's a small Catholic school in East Grand Rapids is where I went. Elementary and middle school, and then my mom, rest her soul, actually graduated from Central in the '60s.
Oh,
So all of my siblings, all five of us, went to high school there and graduated from there. I was the fourth of the five. My younger sister graduated there after me, and we had somebody in our family a student at Central. Had to be for at least 30 years when you consider like cousins on both sides and all of our different tentacles of the family. But yeah, we had somebody at Central High School forever. It's not no longer Central High School. It's now a magnet school
hmm.
of some sort.
So, Sekou, when we talk about being the fourth of five, did that fuel you to be an athlete, to be motivated to accomplish whatever you set your mind to? Or was that kind of a chip on your shoulder because you were one of the younger ones and you had to fight for everything you got?
No, I mean I never felt like I had to operate with some chip on my shoulder, to be honest with you. We grew up in an environment where it was kind of expected that you would participate in different things and be a part of sports teams and other activities. That was just a part of the culture. Everybody did that, and we could. There were a lot of big families where we grew up, so it was kind of a thing where older brothers played or older sisters participated in something, and the younger siblings would come along and follow in those footsteps, not feeling like you had to outdo somebody, but more like you had to continue a tradition of being active, in whatever you did.
That's really good. Hey, behind me is an old picture of you, the NBA Hang Time podcast. My brother in law, both of them, make fun of me because I grew up in Vermont. I'm 45 years old, but I am a North Carolina Tar Heels fan. So Rick Fox is in the picture behind me. And they said, why did I not pick a team closer to home? And well, back when I'm in fifth grade, I just picked a team and I had a uncle who lived in North Carolina. There is not the bias maybe that Michiganders feel for everything Michigan is their sports team. When did you want to pursue a career in the NBA, and how did you drop, or did you drop your loyalties to the teams you rooted for as a kid?
No, I'm the only team I root for to this day is the University of Michigan. Really, it's the University of Michigan football team first and foremost, and then everything after that. And no, I've stayed loyal to Michigan my entire rooting life. I don't even have NFL or an NBA team or a Major League Baseball team that I'm a fan of. I usually pick them based on which former Michigan players are playing for them at the time. So I've had a long run with the Patriots because of Tom Brady that is now officially over.
Yeah.
Um, Wherever Charles Woodson played at the time when he was in the NFL was my favorite NFL team because of him. Um, and that's the good thing about not being kind of one of those fair weather fans where you jumping around like my sons who have grown up in Mississippi, Indiana, and Georgia. They are literally fans of whatever team they feel like being fans of that day, which is foreign to me. I literally picked my team when I was a kid and have not let them go. But that makes my job very easy in terms of rooting interest. I don't, I love watching NBA basketball. I love talking about it, and I love analyzing it. But there's no heartstrings being tugged when I do it, so it makes it much easier.
Hey, quickly, what are your thoughts on Jawan Howard returning to Michigan?
Oh, love it. I mean, I was fired up for it the moment I heard that it was even a possibility. I'm a year older than the Fab Five in terms of. Well, no, I'm not. I'm same age as them, but I'm a year ahead of them in school. So I came out of high school a year before them,
Yeah.
but I was 17 when I graduated. So I've watched them in real time. So they're not
Yeah.
a documentary to me. Like I know people
Right.
now see it and they look at it and it looks like it happened to me years ago. That was like some of the best times of my life, watching them, um, watching the way they changed the culture. And uh, I had a cousin who was a couple years behind them and played at Purdue. So I got a chance to go to some games while they were there and, be around those guys. And now I know Chris, obviously, um, with him working at TNT and NBA TV, and know Jalen and know these guys, and they're fantastic. But I was super fired up for Juwan to get that job because I felt like that was missing. That there needed to be some kind of connection to the guys who, quite frankly, were the most influential group of athletes to maybe ever come through the campus.
Sure.
To deny that, no matter what went on, to me was kind of silly.
Yeah. Hey, my wife said she wanted to marry Jawan Howard, but instead she got stuck with me. So, a little 5'9" Korean guy. I don't know what that means or what that says. Hey, talk a little bit. You had Abby Chin on the NBA Hang Time podcast. She, of course, covers the Boston Celtics. And I do like the Celtics. Of course, I'm in New England, but they do have some great pieces. But talk a little bit about this bubble situation and who is an outsider that you like to make a deep run in these NBA playoffs.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I've been enjoying the scrimmage games, which tells you how starved we've all been for some live basketball. I watched the first game like it was a finals game. I was kind of embarrassed after I realized I watched the whole thing, commercials, everything. I didn't get up, and I think the bubble has been handled tremendously, by the league in terms of just all of the logistics that have to go into it. I would say this: if you think about what sports entities really do big events well, I think you're hard pressed to find anybody that does um, their events the way that the NBA does. I mean, they're just from the places they choose, in terms of location, to all of the things that have to go right to pull those weekends off, like All-Star Weekend or having the finals wherever they have. And you're doing a 7-game series as opposed to a one-off game like the Super Bowl or something like that. So it's a much different monster. The bubble, based on the conversations I've had with people who are already down there, has been, it's come with all of the uncomfortable things that people expected to
Right.
be a part of it. but it's been handled really well, and they know their health and safety is first and foremost in terms of priorities. I'm going down next month, late next month, early September, so I'll get a chance to experience it myself.
Yeah.
But in terms of teams that I think have an opportunity to really do something or make some noise in the bubble, I think Portland, if you know, if they can make up ground on Memphis and get into the playoff mix, they present a very difficult first round opponent for the Lakers, who are likely to have the number one seed only because they're healthy and they have the kind of star power in the right places that could give the Lakers some fits. And then on the Eastern Conference side, I really like Miami. I've liked them since December when I went down for a week and was around them, their new team with Jimmy Butler, as the leader, ringleader, if you will. Some of those younger guys who have stepped into more prominent roles, Bam Adebayo, Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson, another Michigan guy, and then Goran Dragic and some other really good players come to the bench. Miami, to me, seems like a team that could get into situations this year in the playoffs and really cause problems for some of those other teams in the East.
Yeah, Duncan can really shoot the ball. Hey, so when we look at NBA players, for you, I know in Vermont it's different, and I'm just always a fan. I get starstruck, and it's just kind of crazy because I'm supposed to be 45 years old and a little bit mature. But even now, seeing professional athletes, I get, well, starstruck. For you, what's it like just seeing guys that are former NBA players now working with you in broadcasting? When did you realize like they're just men just like you, putting their pants on one leg at a time? And how did you break down and just getting to know them versus really standing in awe of professional athletes?
Yeah, I've been around them for so long that it never really, the starstruck part of it never really got me. I will say this: every time I see Shaq in this, all these years later, like I don't get starstruck, but I do scratch my head as to how a human being could be that big and that proportioned and like that. He doesn't look like, I know he looks on TV. You look at him and go, "Oh, he looks really big," but it doesn't know justice
Right.
in terms of how gigantic he is when you see him in the hallway or he's in the locker room. We have lockers. Everybody has a locker in this big room down at the studio, and where you change and keep all your suits, whatever. And literally every time I see Shaq to this day, I laugh, like I crack up at how gigantic he is. But I've just always enjoyed the fact that these guys are human beings. Like, they really are regular, down to earth, good people, good human beings that you have the most. I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the conversations that we have in terms of how boring and normal they are. It's not like you sit around telling crazy, wild stories all the time. That's a lot of times you're talking about your kids or, something that you've dealt with in your life or something that somebody's dealing with. We talk about our parents because a lot of us are similar in age. So we're dealing with the same sorts of things in life. Right now, and it's just fun. I mean, I enjoy all those guys as much as I enjoy the folks we work with who didn't play and who aren't famous and who aren't that kind of famous and stick out to people in public like that. But they're just good people. I mean, that's one thing I hope people recognize about them is that they're entertaining to watch on TV now, and you get to laugh a lot watching the Thursday night guys on TNT. But they're really good people, man. I was under the weather. I was sick last year during the finals. I got sick on on the road during the playoffs, and I was home, resting and getting better. And I can't tell you how many calls I got from coworkers and Charles Barkley texted me, and I didn't even know Charles had my number. And I was, it was awesome. But you realize, at those important times in life, these guys, like I said, these guys are just regular people who care about the people they work with and want to do a good job and want to make sure that the person next to them has every opportunity to do their best job.
Yeah, that's great. I know Ernie Johnson Jr. came on my radio show. This was several years ago, and his dad was born in Brattleboro, Vermont. So it's just kind of a
Mm.
cool connection there. You talk about families a lot. Sekou, where were you when you found out that Kobe had passed away?
Oh wow, that's a crazy story I've told on some radio shows I did in the aftermath of that. So my wife and I we were somewhere between Birmingham, Alabama, and coming home. It was a Sunday, and we were driving back from a weekend spent going to visit our kids who were in college over in Mississippi. And a friend of mine texted me. So a friend of mine who's not in the business, but who's a big basketball watcher, big basketball fan. And my wife was driving. I was trying to take a nap. And I looked at my phone and it said, is this true about Kobe? And so I had been kind of dozing off, sleeping in the passenger seat, and I was like, true about Kobe. I was like, let me see. I was like, let me see. Let me, you never know what it is in our business,
Right.
So I said, let me look on social media and see what this is talking about. And when I looked and saw the initial report, I think it was TMZ, had put the first report out, I freaked out. Because I couldn't believe that something like that would have happened. But just for whatever reason, that Sunday, that early in the morning,
Yeah.
it just didn't make sense to me. It didn't register to me. So my phones after that went haywire. Just people calling, trying to find out if it was true, people hearing about it, texting you. My oldest sister, who is not the world's biggest sports fan by any stretch, but she, of course, knew who Kobe Bryant was, and she's got granddaughters who are, basketball players as young girls, kind of like Kobe's daughters. And she called me, and when she called me, I knew. I was like, okay, this is to the point now where if she's fine, she's heard about this, it's all over the place. And we spent the rest of the drive home just kind of in shock, and trying to figure out what came next. It was just one of the strangest days I can remember. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget where I was and kind of how dazed and confused I was for about the next 24 hours, just trying to wrap my head around what had happened.
Right. Yeah, 2020 has definitely been a year. This is some of the lights, the skyline, I guess, at in Grand Rapids. And something else is the social injustice, the unrest that's taking place. Here's a picture of you. I believe it was one of the protests. I stole this picture, I think, off your Facebook page. But
Oh yeah.
it, can you just talk about how important it is that we follow through with what's been taking place? And not only are we a voice, but we continue to provide positive action or reaction to the social injustice that's been happening for years and years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us are immune to it at this stage. That rally, that picture, I was at a rally that a young man I know who's a football player at Samford University. He played youth football with my oldest son, and I helped coach him when he was young. He's now a gigantic 6'4", 290-pound guy. But there were young guys, a couple college kids who organized this rally, and there was thousands. Had to be a couple thousand people that had marched here in Smyrna, Georgia, right down the road from where we live now, where we used to live, from a park up to the police station. And I enjoy the engagement of so many of these younger people in this movement. It's something that, people talk about, well, when I was young, what did we have that might have been similar to this? And we really didn't have a moment like the social justice movement that's going on now. And, I talk to my dad a lot about it. He's in his 70s, as a Vietnam veteran, has seen more things in his life than I could imagine. And our conversations always center on, which is strange. I'm kind of worn out by what's going on now and just kind of beat down by
Yeah.
all of the nastiness that we see and all the rhetoric and back and forth and the political, shenanigans and, bickering that goes on. And he always has to remind me how much things have changed in his lifetime. and he's kind of the one who lifts my spirits up and says, "Hey, I know you think it's bad." He's like, "But trust me, things have gotten a lot better, and people aren't nearly as nasty as they were before." So when I hear people talk about, well, the country's never been in a worse place than it is now, and I'm like, it sounds right in the moment, and then you talk to somebody with some perspective, and it kind of makes it a little more digestible. But yeah, listen, there's a reckoning going on now that is probably long overdue, obviously, and it's not about payback or vengeance or something like that. It's just about people acknowledging whatever our differences are and whatever our the past transgressions are, acknowledging that we have to do something to make it better. Like
Yeah.
the next generation and the generation after that shouldn't have to still battle these same demons. Like to me, it's like this is a time when you hope we get past it. When I was a senior in high school, my dad and I watched Nelson Mandela get released from prison. And we watched it on CBS Sunday This Morning with Charles Corral. I'll never forget. It was another Sunday morning. And I thought then, at that time, I was saying to myself, wow, the world must really be changing. Here's this guy who's been, everybody knew about Nelson Mandela. You'd read about him clearly. Apartheid was a big deal when I was that age, just in terms of a polarizing issue that had a lot of chatter around it, media attention. And I thought then, wow, the world has to be changing for better if this is happening. And then to think about where we are now, it does play tricks on your mind a little bit about, have we done enough? Have we gone far enough, in my lifetime even? And I would say we haven't. I hope that we have much larger strides to take in the coming years.
Yeah, there's a Bible verse, right, that says, don't get tired or don't give up in doing what's right. And I think when we get worn down, we just have to remember we need to keep standing up and doing the right thing. One more picture of Grand Rapids for you. I just want you to return to that time. Hey, and when you were a teenager, can you just share about your family life, your mentors, who really inspired you to make you believe that you could do what it is you are doing now?
It's interesting. My dad's his middle brother. My dad is the youngest of his three brothers. It's my uncle Carl Smith. He's passed away, but he worked for the state of Michigan Civil Rights Department for like 27 years, and he was a very outspoken, progressive activist for civil rights for all people, but certainly for Black people in the state of Michigan. He owned his own newspaper. It was called The Organizer. It was a newspaper that my cousins and I used to throw. Like we were his paper boys when we were little kids. They'd roll them up and they'd drive us to neighborhoods and we throw them, in people's front doors. So, and he did an unbelievable job, with his paper. It was a community newspaper that kind of catered to specific issues in the community where we grew up. And he was one of the first people to inspire me to get into this business, even though it happened later. It happened when I went to college. It's not like I was one of these 8-year-olds who said I want to grow up and be a sports writer or whatever. But he and my dad and my dad's oldest brother, all three of them were very, very smart men, very engaged. They, politically, academically, and the proximity of where we live, where we grew up. Grand Rapids, for people that don't know, is about 99 miles from Chicago. Around, if you could just go straight across the lake, you could get there a lot faster. And then we're 100+ miles from Detroit. So we had not only our hometown newspaper growing up, the Grand Rapids Press, we had two papers, two big city, sports sections in Detroit to the east and Chicago to the west that you could get in machines in my neighborhood growing up. So my dad would have 5 or 6 newspapers on our kitchen counter every weekend that he would read. And he would read them, leave them out. And like my brother and I would come after him and kind of pick through what we wanted, whether it was comics or the sports section, whatever. And I grew up reading the sports sections of 5 or 6 newspapers every week. and I just kind of built up a love for newspapers and sports sections in general. I used to be infatuated with. I love that stories would talk about somebody, and they would mention by at least the fourth or fifth paragraph how tall they were and how much they weighed.
Yeah.
I don't know why. When I was a kid, I was fascinated to know how tall somebody was and how much they weighed, because these stories used to always tell you that at some point.
Yeah. It's funny. I used to. I love. I still like holding a newspaper in my hand, but I remember fantasy basketball was a lot more difficult then than it is now with the internet, seeing who did what and all of that. Sekou Smith, spending some time. Where did you go to college?
Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. It's a nice haul from Grand Rapids, about 1,100 miles. I got inspired to go by another really influential person in my hometown, a guy named Fred Montgomery, whose family was from Mississippi and whose family had a long history of going to Jackson State. His nephew was one of my best friends growing up, and he'd gone to Jackson State early before I did. He was older than me; he was a year ahead of me in high school, and I used to hear about it all the time. And I'd done some research and found out Walter Payton went there, and you kind of find out the history of these, historically Black colleges and universities. And at that time, A Different World was on television. Used to come on, the Cosby Show, A Different World. So in my mind, I had this image in my mind that all historically Black colleges were like Hillman, and that you would meet Lisa Bonet or somebody like that, on
Whitley.
campus, and Whitley Gilbert. And so, it was a romantic notion in my mind at that age, but it turned out to be the best thing I ever did, getting that far away from home. I got a chance to get into journalism, when I went there, and changed my life. It was the best decision I ever made to get that far away from home and really have to lean into all the stuff I learned growing up, all the good things poured into me in my community that traveled with me, and have guided me ever since.
Plus, it was warm, right? So you could get used to the warm weather down there.
I've just gotten used to it. Outside of a 5-year stretch where we lived in Indianapolis since I went away to school, we've lived south basically that whole time. And the last 2 years, I've finally gotten used to the hot weather. The first 2 months I was at school, I was sweating and needing to take like a shower every 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because the heat, I had no idea what heat index was. The humidity was staggering. But people, like, I'm walking around campus and I'm wearing like a tank top and shorts and trying to beat the heat. And some other person would walk by me with a long sleeve shirt on and jeans, and they wouldn't even be sweating. And I'm going, I don't know, like, what am I doing wrong here? Like, I have to carry a little towel around just to wipe sweat. But I learned, obviously, what the heat index meant. And when they said it's going to feel like 117 degrees today, it really is going to feel like 117 degrees. So I learned, I adjusted, and now after all these years, I think I'm finally gotten acclimated to the climate here in the South.
Oh, good. Sekou, I have a couple more questions, then I'll let you get out. And you said you were a Fab
Sure.
Five fan, of course, Chris Webber. Charles Barkley, you mentioned Shaquille O'Neal and just his size. But Charles Barkley, I remember people saying he was only 6'4", and what he could do when he was in Philadelphia was unbelievable. And I do see some of the comparisons with Zion Williamson now, Zion now. I would say that Charles is a lot more like Zion than Chris Webber. Can you even put those three guys in the same conversation? Or how would you?
Yeah, I wouldn't, because they're all so unique. I saw Webber when he was in 9th grade, and there was a picture of him in our hometown paper the day before his team was going to play in this big Christmas tournament. And they were, it said, the 6'9", 200-pound 9th grader from Detroit Country Day is the number one 9th grader in America, blah, blah. So, and he was kneeling on one knee with his hand on the other hand on the basketball and his other knee kind of propped behind him. the picture made the picture made him look like, okay, I can believe he's a ninth grader. Then we got to the game, and this team came running out, and me and my buddies were at the game, and we're like, "Who's the grown man with this team? Why is that grown guy standing in the middle holding the ball up?" It was Chris Webber, and doing their warm up routine, and he was so much bigger than everybody else. It was shocking. He was as big then in ninth grade as he is now when I see him walking around in the studio. So he was his own unique specimen.
Yeah, yeah.
Charles, certainly, there's never been anybody like him. You could try and make comparisons, but nobody with that kind of explosiveness and the size he was at back then. And Zion is bigger than Charles. He's taller than Charles. I don't know which one of them weighed the most, at the time they were 19, 20 years old. But if Zion is as big as I've seen it, and I was in New Orleans during training camp, I saw him up close and personal. I mean, he's a humongous human being, like just a gigantically built human being. The fact that any of those three guys could do what they do on a basketball court is a reminder to me that that NBA players in particular, but certainly professional athletes, are the rarest of physical specimens, on this planet. I mean, it's uncanny to think how big some of them are, how graceful they are, how fast, strong, and powerful they are. I mean, it makes no sense. And so comparing their games to me is hard because they all are so specific to whatever they do and do best. And we're only seeing the beginning of what Zion could be. I mean, who knows what his ceiling might be. But I think they all represent a very specific piece of the timeline of NBA players at their position, which when Barkley was coming through, he was an undersized power forward. Well, Webber was coming through, he was a prototypical power forward. He was the future, a stretch, four or whatever you want to call it, a big guy who can shoot and handle the ball. And now Zion shows up, and he's literally a freak of nature. He's 6'6", 280 pounds, and has the explosiveness of, the most explosive athleticism of any player we might have ever seen in the NBA, which says, again, is just jaw-dropping to think of somebody that we would say that about after 70-plus years of NBA basketball.
And I do wonder if some recency bias comes into play, but everybody loves the NBA that they grew up with, and I know that's true for me. A couple of quick questions, I'm going to let you go. I think Rasheed Wallace, I heard that he was probably the most talented player if he had a better work ethic. And then I know Sean Kemp. As a kid, I loved watching him, the Rain Man, but then that strike, he certainly put on some pounds. Who's a player that you can think of that if they would have stayed in shape or given the best or the work ethic that Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan had, would have definitely made a larger impact than they did?
And I don't know why some of these guys, there have been stories about guys who didn't have the kind of work ethic, but maybe it was something else. We don't know. You hear kind of urban legends. I always thought the most talented player I'd seen in terms of a guy with ridiculous size and a skill set that was like really ahead of his time was Derek Coleman. And he got knocked for not being the hardest worker, but I don't know that was. I've talked to people who played against him who've known him for a long time. He was a hard worker. He was just a difficult guy, to deal with, for whatever reasons. But when I think about just pure talent and a guy that if he'd had everything lined up perfectly for him, he probably could have been, one of those handful of players we talk about as being the best that ever did it. And I think Rasheed Wallace fits in that same category.
Derek Coleman was so much fun to watch with Kenny Anderson when they both came into the league. I remember some old NBA video that talked about that duo. And Billy Owens, I thought he was going to turn into something, but he never accomplished what some people thought. But two questions, then we'll let you go. Sekou Smith, NBA Hangtime Podcast. Make sure you check that out. The first is, if you were featured in a movie, would you want to play the hero or the villain?
The That's a good question. I guess it would depend on what genre the movie is. I'm a big science fiction fan.
Okay.
I grew up, Star Wars, the whole nine. Um, when I went to see The Empire Strikes Back at the Easttown Theater in Grand Rapids, we walked from our house, and this is back when they had like the actors who were walking around the theater dressed up as the characters.
Yeah.
I thought Darth Vader was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen. So if I would pay money to be Darth Vader and let James Earl Jones dub my voice. I think that would be a spectacular thing to be able to do.
And then I still this last question from Hernando Planos, who does a lot of basketball stuff. And he said that if or when the feature film comes out about you, your life, which actor do you want to play yourself?
Oh, well, everybody likes to embellish, right? You got to find somebody who's way better looking than you, taller, all that good stuff. Mm. I've never thought about an actor that would play me in a movie about myself.
See, I always say The Rock, but we look nothing alike. That's okay with me.
Yeah, we don't. I don't have any doppelganger in Hollywood that I know of that anybody has ever mentioned to me. But you know what? If I had my druthers and I could go with an actor I like or somebody whose work I really appreciate, I would, even though we look nothing alike, and he'd probably want to fight me for even mentioning it. I think it'd be spectacular to have Omar Epps play me in a movie.
There you go.
Yeah, I've always liked it.
Sekou, thank you so much for making the time. You're the best, and we wish you all the best, especially if you head down to the bubble in a month. So take care and best of health to you.
Thank you. Tell your son to take his winter clothes with him now. Pack warm if he's going to Grand Rapids.
I will definitely. Again, Sekou Smith, making some time, staying up late. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again soon. Jay Fuller Interviews, the Backfire podcast on Spotify. We'll catch you all soon.